Welcome to the podcast where we discuss all matters financial planning and investing. This content contains general information only and may not be relevant to everyone. Please contact our office to make sure and determine if this is relevant for you. Hi and welcome to the podcast. I'm David Loughnan and I'm joined with Cole Eccles. How are you, Cole?
Good as half, Dave.
Very well. And today we're really diving into superannuation, the importance of it, and also the contributions that really need to go in there for most of Australians to do really well and be able to retire. What I find it's going to be one of the biggest asset classes that most people are going to need a lot of money over time to really continue their lifestyle and fund it. And what do you feel that's probably one of the most important contributions going into super to build it, Cole?
I suppose they're all important. The main one is your employee contributions, obviously unless you're working for yourself, because that's the regular contribution that goes in. But there's basically you can either put contributions or you can either put money to super before tax. So that is someone's claiming a tax deduction for it, whether it be you or your employer. No such thing as a free lunch. So the HA wants to get their bit, and the super fund then deducts the tax from your super balance, but it's at a much lower rate than what you'd pay personally. Or then there's after tax, so money you already pay tax on, and you're getting it into super. And the reason why the two is because there's limits to what you can get into super. But I think the main one is, your employee contribute, because that's the regular one. And then from yourself, if you say employed, is salary sacrifice, because that helps you to build your super or invest in a tax effective way, because you're paying less tax on that amount of income, and then it's going into an asset or asset class that can then grow over time.
Yeah, generally what I find, and you make a really good point, and I think a lot of people don't understand that super contributions are taxed from the employer. So they think, what's happened? They don't see their statements that happen. So it can what's called concessionally taxed at 15% when it goes in there, depending on what you earn. As long as you earn under $250,000, that happens. But also what I find is the normal employer contributions, which at the moment they're 11.5. They're moving up to 12 and up from July 1, but there are some different, if you work for the government, sometimes they pay a little bit more and so forth, incentives. But what I find, if someone just kicks along at those rates, and if they're in their 40s or 50s now, generally their balance is not going to be enough. Do you know what I mean? Just employer contributions going into superannuation. And in Australia, it is the number one funder of people's retirement by far.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's minimal people who actually have investment properties or share market investments outside of superannuation. And that's why it's really important, because most people can, with a bit of love and attention, actually get it to hopefully grow and do a little bit more. So you've got the salary sacrifice. What do we got after that?
On a pre-tax basis is going back to the concessionary tax one. So some people may not know that there's an annual limit that you can put in super on a concessionary tax basis. So that's currently 30,000. So if you're not using that each year, you can actually go back and make up the last 5 financial years contributions. So that's called your carried forward or your unused contributions. We just call it catch-up contributions. So that's a big one, because that could allow you may potentially give you a big kick to your super and save yourself some tax as well. Yeah. And then after that is, if you're not on a high income and it's perhaps not beneficially taxed, or from a tax perspective for you to put money on a pre-tax basis, then you can, if you're low income, get the government co-contribution. So that's you earn money or you've got tax money, you put into super and the government will give you a boost up to $500 on the super contribution.
Just popping back to the catch-up one first, what a lot of people, that it's probably the first time they've actually heard that. So if they haven't been maxing out their concessional contributions, there's a couple of ways you can find out how to find that information. One, you can ask your accountant what you've got available. The second one, you can actually just look at your current superannuation contributions and work backwards. The third way is really you can go to the ATO's website. So you've got to go into MyGov through to your tax portal, and you can look it up, the information in there to actually get it. Because a lot of the times where that can come in really handy, if people a little bit later in life are trying to boost their super, they can increase their concessional contributions with their employer, so salary sacrifice, or do a lump sum contribution as well to really boost up and do it over a 5-year period. What we find is the strategy can work really well if that one people are looking to do that. And then you've got this next one that you were just talking about.
So after tax contribution, so you got the co-contribution. Talking about giving your super a boost. Another one is a downsizer contribution. So that allows you, so if you sell the family home, so you should take a step back. So there's not only annual limits to how much you can get into super. There's also age limits or age restrictions as well. Most people, if all the kids have left and they later in life and they decide that the house is too big for them or too much for them, and suddenly you sell the house, you're ending up with a good few $100,000 in the bank account. The downsizer contribution is a good way to get money into super after the age that you would normally not be able to get money into super.
Yeah,
It's basically a couple could get $300,000 each. There are some restrictions, obviously, or limits, but you can get $300,000 each into super. And I suppose why you put into super at the age of 70 or 75 or 80, whatever it is because, like you said before, super is the cornerstone of retirement savings.
Yeah, it's one of those things that can be down the track tax-free, depending on how much it has limits, but most people will be within those limits. What I always say, there's another one is the non-concessional side of super. What I find is a lot of people don't know that you can put in like an extra 120,000 into super every year. It's after tax money, so it's just money you might have laying around. So you've got the downsizer, but also if you're looking to get some lump sums in for different reasons down the track, you could put 120,000 in the year as what's called non-concessional, but also you can do a carry forward with that type of thing. You can do 3 years in a row. So that gives you 360,000 per person to actually get into super.
Right.
And what I find interesting, sometimes when people get down the track with selling businesses or selling properties or so forth, trying to build up enough capital to provide a really good income, that can be a really good one as well. And when you're trying to boost your super down later in life, generally when you're in your 20s, your 30s and early 40s, you're not trying to do that.
No.
But when you do get later in life, it's how do I really boost this thing up? And a lot of people just are unaware that there is really two sides of the contribution, plus all these other ones. And it's like, how confusing is it all in general? We also have even what's called spouse contributions. How's that one work?
The spouse is if so generally it'd be a higher income earner and a low income earner. So basically the high income earner is able to make a contribution. There's no limit to the actual contribution itself, but by making a spouse contribution, you can claim a tax offset, and that tax offset is capped, and it's 18%. It's 18% of the contribution, but it's capped. The offset's taxed at $540, so you wouldn't do more than $3,000 if that's what you're trying to get the most of the tax offset. But basically, it's a low income earner and a high income earner, and allows someone with a low income with a small super balance to be able to boost their or spouse to grow their super over time without them having sort of employee contributions and getting some sort of tax benefit from that.
Yeah, cool. Have we touched on the co-contribution from the government one as well?
Yeah, so that's, again, it's a after-tax contribution. So it's targeted for low-income earners. You put in $1,000 and the government will give you $500.
Yeah, it's like a 50% return.
Oh, yeah,
if you earn under 37,000 or up to 58, and it actually decreases. Down, but it's one of those things that what a lot of people don't also know is that if one spouse is earning a lot more money than the other one, you can actually transfer money across. How does that one work?
So that's spouse splitting or contribution splitting, and it's basically one spouse would be employee I should take a step back. You can only split contributions that are pre-tax, so concessional contributions. So you can split you can split 85% of the contribution. And the reason why it's 85% is because you alluded to the 15% tax earlier. So if you put in $1,000, $150 tax comes out. So the 85% of the $1,850 can be split up to a maximum of the concessional contribution cap for the year. So at the moment it's 30,000. So that's a maximum you could do.
Yeah, and why that can work really well for couples too. So if one's building up and their super is going to be over like the balance transfer cap, which is a cap that can go into what's called pension phase down the track. It's a great strategy that potentially can work for couples to build up the other partners as well as the non-concessionals, all the other ones out there. There's just a lot of different ways to actually get money into super, isn't there?
Yes. Definitely. And super's the 4 pillars of the retirement income system in Australia, and super, like you said before, super is, I don't think there's any other tax structure I know for a fact, there's no other tax structure that's more tax effective than superannuation. That's why people should look to make the most of it. And like you said earlier, you mentioned about young people probably not focus on it, but you said before that 12% of your income is probably not enough to get you where you probably want to be in terms of how much you need to have in super. But if you're in your 20s, and you started with a little bit extra 3% on top of the 12% you're getting, the next 40 years, that can make a
Yeah,
a massive difference.
huge amounts of money can actually get in there. And it's like having the vision, like I'm 51 now, turning 52. And I'm like, super's not far away, because you can access your own super at 60 years old if you meet certain conditions. And a lot of people don't know that. They think it's 65 back in the old days, where now it's actually the age pension that kicks in for you at 67 these days. It's been a transition where you used to access at 55, and that's drifted out to 60 now. And so that's finished. And the age pension, they had a superannuation problem in general in Australia funding the retirees, and how they've actually fixed that is in two main things. Is the younger generation is getting more money going to super, so by the time they get to retirement age, they'll have a lot more than the generation now. So that's one thing they've fixed. And the second one is that because everyone's living longer, they've pushed it out to 67 as well, where you can't get any help from the government until you're 67, which makes it a lot tougher. So if people really aren't looking after their superannuation or other investments to fund their retirement, can be extremely difficult for people. And we run into it all the time, that people didn't know you can put that little bit extra in, or what it would actually mean. And from all the plans, that hundreds of plans that we've done, I have thousands of plans now over 10 years. It is one of the biggest asset classes that over a 15 or a 20-year period can make a huge amount of difference and a lot more money, by understanding the contributions and what makes sense to most people. So what I find with super contributions, everyone's unique. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So there's the tax side of it, but then there's also the tax side of it once you hit into retirement. And there's probably one contribution we didn't touch on. There's a lifetime, if you sell a business, you've got a lifetime cap of 500,000 from the sale of the business that you can look to add into that as well, which can give a big boost and help people with capital gains tax down the problem, or down the track, and so forth. So there's just so many different varieties of situations and things that can happen, that when we start talking about it to people, no wonder their eyes glaze over. It's extremely difficult to understand. So just on the super thing, how else can people get the most out of their super?
I think it's how it's actually invested is a big thing. Is getting money into super. I find a lot of people you talk to, because super is such a long-term thing. So someone who's 20 years old, it's 40, 45 years away. That's a long time away. The employer's putting money into super or employee contribution, so they don't actually see it. So there's this, like, people like this apathy towards it. People don't really think about it until they get to, like you said, 9, 10 years out of retirement. Like, I better take an interest in that. So I think it's how it's invested. I talk to a lot of people and they go, oh, what's that super fund return? It's really, what do you invest in? It's, you put your money into the default fund, and yes, that's the performance figures reported, but you've got so many options depending on what fund you're in, and what super is such a big thing that you're almost unlimited to what you can do. And that's a big thing, is like how it's invested over the 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, like all I hear on like TV is all about fees, right? So there's a lot of advertising around, our super fund's the lowest fees. That's great, right? But the reality, the two things that are way more important, the fees are important, but what you're invested in, obviously you need to be making sure that's going as well as it can be. And that last one, the one we're talking about today, is the contributions. It's no use getting a 10% return on 50 grand. It really doesn't matter. It helps. But if you get those type of returns on $1 million or $2 million, what happens is they compound a lot faster. And generally, most people can't see that far out, so they're not adding enough money to super for long enough for it to hit the 500,000 or the $1 million or the $2 million. So for me, what we're talking about today, the contribution strategy is number one importance. Number two importance is what you're invested in, because like fees are generally similar these days. There's not too much variety. On low balances there is, but as you get up, the actual returns of investments are costing people 50 to 100 grand with higher incomes, rather than focusing on this is $50 cheaper than that one, or $100 cheaper. So I think it's really understanding, if you really want to look after your super and boost it up, the contribution strategy between your employer, yourself, and all those varieties we chatted about today. Then you've got the investments, which is really important. Like obviously returns and so forth are never guaranteed, but things are likely to continue depending when the markets go up and down. And then obviously fees in the overall scheme of it and functionality that can actually happen there. So it's one of the vehicles that, whether people like it or not, they do like it a lot more when they can access the money. And once you start giving it love and attention, you feel like it's yours. I feel most people don't feel like their super's their money,
Yeah.
or they got conspiracy theories around
Yeah,
why they
that's right.
won't get it. I think that's a dangerous way to be. But
Yeah.
from everything that I've seen them, and my retired clients are the happiest clients, right?
Yeah.
They've got money. Their super seems to keep working for them, keep paying them. And it's not paying that tax anymore that really helps for most people down the tracks. Have you got any final words about all that, Cole?
No, there's no time like now with present. Like you said, if with time, it doesn't have to be a lot of time. It could be 10, 15 years. 1 year is probably not enough time, but it's taking action basically. And those important ones, the 2 points you spoke about is, one is making sure that you're making the most out of it in terms of what you got in your super fund. Fees is one thing, but look at value. Is that fund giving you really what you want? What is the investment performance being like? Is there anything better? And then, making the most of the different contributions you can get into super, both before tax and after tax.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's got a lot to it. It's one of those vehicles that really, that I find most people are scared of running out of money down the track. And that's one thing you want to continue your lifestyle once you worked hard all your life, and once you can access those things. I think it's extremely important. So if anyone watching today, if you need any help with that, feel free to reach out and we can help you out and chat about all the options you may or may not have. And thanks for watching. And if you need any help, reach out, and we'll see you on your next week, Cole.
Thanks, Dave.